Hello, everyone. Today, I wanted to talk about the second matchup that I will be discussing for the Stanley Cup playoffs, which will be the Carolina Hurricanes versus the Nashville Predators. One interesting thing about this matchup that I just find really enjoyable is this is a matchup that we cannot have any other year in the first round. The only chance that this would ever have of being a playoff series if it wasn't for this year is a Stanley Cup final, which I wish that there was more of that happening where it was teams that normally wouldn't play each other in the first round, because I think that this is really fun and interesting to see. But starting the video though, just jumping into their overall records, Carolina has been amazing this season. Right now, either them or Vegas is going to win the President's Trophy. And it's probably going to be Vegas, but Carolina is really close. This season, they went 36, 12, and 8 for 80 points in a shortened season. And that's really impressive in 56 games. They probably could have put up around like 120, I want to say, in a normal regular season. And that would be phenomenal to see. On the other hand, Nashville had a 31, 23, and 2 record for 64 points, which is barely squeaking into the playoffs there. They were very competitive with Dallas down to the last day. But I think Carolina would rather Dallas be in here than Nashville. And we'll talk about it a little more why later in the video. But to start off, we'll talk about stats of the top players on the team. So the leading point scorer for Carolina is Sebastian Ajo, to the surprise of nobody. In 55 games played, he has 24 goals and 33 assists for 57 points, which puts him just above a point a game, which that's what you expect from Aho. Aho has been phenomenal, and he's been consistent for the past few years. And he's been a top-end player ever since he got moved to center, pretty much. He's been one of the best centers in the game. Second on the points, I was very surprised about, and I would have had him as the special stat if he wasn't in the top 3. Because Vincent Trocheck has been quietly having a phenomenal season, almost being a point a game. In 46 games played, he has 17 goals and 26 assists for 43 points. And as far as I know, Trocheck was second or third liner on most teams, just a middle six forward, but he's putting up numbers like a top line forward, and it's really interesting to see. And then Dougie Hamilton is third on the team in points. In 55 games played, he has 10 goals and 32 assists for 42 points, which for a defenseman, that is phenomenal. It is not enough to be in like Norris consideration, like in Adam Fox or Victor Hedman this season, but those numbers are still really impressive. Then moving on to Nashville stat leaders. First on the team in points, I found this interesting, but I'm not surprised, was Roman Josi. What was really interesting about that is the fact that it's a defenseman, and it's not an offensive defenseman like an Erik Karlsson or a John Carlson, or even a Dougie Hamilton, like you would expect to put up lots of points. And he had really good stats, but not offensive defenseman stats. In 48 games played, he had 8 goals, 25 assists for 33 points. And the fact that I'm talking about him not being a great offensive defenseman, and you wouldn't expect this from him, just goes to show his overall game how amazing he is. And there's a reason why he won the Norris Trophy last season. He puts up these really good offensive numbers quietly. Meanwhile, his defensive game is phenomenal too. Second on the team is Philip Forsberg, who was closer to a point per game than Josi was. He just missed some time. In 38 games played, he had 12 goals and 19 assists for 31 points. So in 10 less games played, he had 2 less points than Josi. So overall, he is technically the higher point per game. So Forsberg has been great this year, and he's been a real reason why this team had such a turnaround, which we'll talk about later, and he's been phenomenal. And Calle Yonkro has quietly been having a really good year as third on the team in points. In 49 games played, he has 13 goals, 15 assists for 28 points. It's been a really good year for him. But it's a problem, in my opinion, when you're third on the team in points isn't even... Actually, no, never mind. I was going to say a point every other game, but he is at that pace. But still, it's not that great. And going on to the special stats, this is the type of player that you want to be in that top three. Ryan Johansen, in 47 games played, he only has 6 goals and 14 assists for 20 points, which those stats aren't bad by any extent, but that's a middle six forward. And when you're paying your middle six forward $8 million a season, that's not good. And the fact that they have that much cap tied into players that aren't producing really explains why someone like Calle Jarnkrok, whose numbers are really good but not necessarily should be top end numbers, are third on the team in points. But Ryan Johansen has shown flashes of being phenomenal, but he really needs to bring it in the playoffs for Nashville to have a chance to get past Carolina. And if they get past them, either Tampa or Florida right after them. The special stat for the Hurricanes, Marty Necas has also quietly been having a phenomenal season. I've been keeping my eye on him all year. In 52 games played, he has 14 goals and 27 assists for 41 points. And that is from last year where he was fringe staying in the NHL. I think for the most part he was in the NHL though. And he was very comparable to Philip Hedl on the Rangers, who solid third liner. He's young and could probably be a top 6 forward at some point. And then he just had a phenomenal breakout year and 10 points away from 11 points a game from points from being a point a game player isn't too shabby. And those are top line numbers from him. And it was only 1 point short of Hamilton, so we almost made the list of the top 3, which then I have to find someone else with some weird stats. Moving on to the goaltending, I don't know who Carolina's going to play. So they could either play the rookie, who has had phenomenal stats ever since coming in, arguably one of the best goalies in the NHL, and the only reason he's not being talked about for Vezina, I think, is because of his games played are so low. And I do think he should be getting more consideration for Calder than he is Alex Nidokovic in 23 games played, has a 190 goals against, which anything below 2 is unbelievably good, and a 932 save percentage, and I consider anything above a 920 amazing, and he's a 932, and it's not a small sample size either. He has been phenomenal. And for the past few seasons, I have been saying that they should give Nidokovic a chance, because I think that he could be their solution in net and be a starting goalie. I would have never predicted anything like this. But the only reason why there's a question is it's a matter of who does management trust more, him or Peter Mrazek, who's now back from injury, and he's having a really good season this year too. In 12 games played, he has a 206 goals against and a 923 save percentage. While those numbers aren't as good as Nidokovic, he's more established, and there's less of a risk of him cracking under pressure in the playoffs because he's been there before and he's played there. Nidokovic, the nerves might get to him for all we know. But for me, I think Nidokovic is the way to go, and I think that he'll be really key in any sort of playoff run they go on, and I don't think Mrazek is the answer. But going in Nashville, this is going to be a huge goaltending duel because they have a phenomenal goalie in it too. And I only needed to list one for them. UC Soros has been phenomenal this season. In 36 games played, a 228 goals against and a 927 save percentage. That is unreal, especially for a team that not that long ago, their defense was pretty much all injured or suspended, except for like one player, and it was an AHL defense, and he's still managing to put up these numbers, even though he has had to suffer with defense like that some games. And while I think Nashville has one of the best top 4 defenses in the NHL, after their top 3, it's really rough, I think. Dante Fabro, I do like as the number 4. I'm not sure if he's quite there yet, though. But Josi, Ellis, and Ekholm are phenomenal top 3. But if you could take advantage of that bottom 3, you could easily take advantage of this team. Now, looking at the records against each other, I think that this is deceptive. Because you look at Carolina's record against Nashville, it's 6-2-0. Nashville's against Carolina is 2-5-1. So looking at that, it looks like Carolina should easily come in and mop the floor with them. And I don't think that that's going to be the case even a little bit. And we'll get more into why a little bit later. But so Carolina in the goals for category is 11th in the NHL with a .313 goals for per game. And they're a third in goals against with a .239. And I think that gives a lot of credit to their defense, which I am willing to say is the best defense in the NHL. You have Jacob Slavin, who I think is the best defenseman in the NHL defensively. And you have Dougie Hamilton, who's one of the best offensive defensemen in the NHL. That's a phenomenal pairing. And then that's not even mentioning that you have Brett Pesce right behind them, who's also been amazing and very underrated. And I heard earlier in the year some calls for him for the Norris Trophy, which I had no argument against when those were happening. And then after that, whether you have Jake Gardiner or Brady Shea as your number 4, it's still really good. And then having one of those guys on your bottom pair, that's phenomenal. Granted, neither of them have had as good seasons with Carolina as they had with their previous teams, and they've both taken major drop-offs. But they're still top 4 defensemen, and it's phenomenal to see that. Now going on to Nashville, their goals for, this is where they struggle, like I was talking about with their point leaders. They have 2.7 goals per game, which is 21st in the NHL. That is not good. And like I was saying before, they need Johansen to show up. They need Duchesne to show up. They need these guys that are making a lot of money. I could have easily put Duchesne there instead of Johansen. They need these big name players who are making tons of money to put up big points, or they're going nowhere. And they'll need to start a rebuild otherwise, because they don't have the money to build a good team around them unless if it's all young players, which is a rebuild. Their goals against, though, is a .275, which is 12th in the NHL. I don't blame their top-end defensemen or their goaltending. Like I was saying before, it's the depth. Overall, I don't like their defensive depth, and I think that it could get a lot better. I think it could get a lot better in the off-season, but we just have to wait and see what management decides to do and what route they decide to take. But as of now, I don't like their defensive depth. Now, the final stat is one key stat that I think really matters going into this season for both teams. And I want to start with Nashville on this one. Nashville, since March 15th, has been 27-1. That is an amazing record. For 47 points in 28 games is unreal. That is pretty much at the same pace that I think even a little better than what Carolina's overall record is. And Carolina is up there for the President's Trophy. And that's the reason they're in the playoffs. Because before then, they were seen as one of the worst teams in the NHL with an 11-16-1 record before then. And the reason why I chose March 15th is when they beat the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I really feel like that win was the turning point of their season. But in that span, since March 15th, they have been 2-2 against Carolina, winning their last 2 games against them, which could be a bad sign for Carolina going into this series. Because I've looked at this series when it was first picked out, and I was like, okay, Carolina should win this pretty easily. But looking at how they've been playing recently, and not Carolina, Nashville, they're going to give them a real fight. And it's going to be a close series. Looking at Carolina's big set, though, I have Peter Mrazek, which seems a little weird that they're debating on the goaltending, and I put one of their goalies. But in 2019-2020 season, he had a .905 save percentage, which on the surface is average, but it was on the best defense in the NHL, in my opinion. And I think I talked about this in my goalie rankings video. I think I had him last in the NHL for starting goalies. And he's been having a phenomenal year this year. But if they decide to start Mrazek, and he puts up these types of numbers in the playoffs, and let's say he loses the first 2 games and then they go to Nidokovic, he needs to make up a lot of ground there, and he can't let up even 2 losses or it's over and Nashville moves on. And overall, though, I think it's going to be a really tight series, a lot tighter than anyone expected going into it, or even just looking on the surface. I saw a post on Instagram from the NHL, and all the comments were saying about how easy this should be for Carolina. And like I said, they'd rather be playing Dallas. Dallas hasn't been really good recently, but they almost squeaked in there. The fact that Nashville was able to come roaring back from being seen as a bottom team in the NHL really goes to show how resilient they've been, and they're dangerous. They need to find a way to get through Nashville. This isn't the same team that before their last 2 games against them, they were 6-0 against. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Personally, I am picking Carolina to win the series in probably about 6 games, but it is going to be a fight for both teams. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.